Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, and of course, YouTube is the best way to interact with the show, where your comments, questions, concerns, all that stuff come in real time, which means you can interact and be a full-fledged part of the show. John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California, where I can say it is finally sunny again. It finally feels like California after a week or so where I felt like I needed to build an ark. I'm not really sure. It was real bad. Meanwhile, holding it down back on the East Coast is Matt Ibby Ibanez. So Ibby, we have a lot to dive into. It's pretty much going to be a one-note episode here this week. But before we talk about any of that, how you feeling?
Well, John, in comparison to everybody else, and I think me and you are pretty much on the same page, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but in comparison to everyone else, I'm doing damn good. You know, I have nothing really to complain about. I know others have plenty to complain about. Yes, I have thoughts on everything. Yes, I have thoughts on the entire process. Yes, I have things I want to get off of my chest. But for the most part, I'm in a good mood. You know, other things bother me in life, but when it comes to our New York Mets, I'm actually quite all right today, and I'm ready to talk about it, and I'm sure you are as well. And hopefully the chat fills up as well, and we will act as that therapy session that many desperately need, which has always been the theme of our show. It is a therapy session, hour-plus long therapy. Let's get into it.
Yeah, you know, first of all, I just want to apologize for all of our regular viewers and listeners who are in, you know, a difficult time spot now for them. But I do want to welcome in some other folks that maybe can't be with us when we record at 4 o'clock. Now we're going 2 hours later. It's 6 o'clock, and that is all entirely my fault. This is the most Hollywood thing I will ever say on this show, but I had a rehearsal for a commercial that I booked. So I am Hollywood Rock now, and that is my persona moving forward. I will fully own being the heel of the show. I think I was anyway, because I argue with everybody on Twitter about everything. So I think it's all fitting. Anyway, jump into the comments real quick. Welcome a few people on board. We got Chris Ferraro saying, catching y'all live finally, LFGM. James Dowling following it up, LFGM. JD, and then we've got Chris Torres, LFGM as well. And then Chris jumping back in, just saying, I'm feeling good, want another bat, but I'm fine with it all. I totally agree with that. We'll dive into it. And then Stevie Mac doing my job and your job better than we ever could. Hit the like button. We haven't even started the conversation, but yes, hit that like button for sure.
If there's one thing I will say, I see what we do have 7 people in here. I know some of you are already subbed, and I'll keep on saying this throughout. We're at 193. A small, tiny goal I would like to hit before this episode is up, before this live is up. I would like to finally hit 200, so we need 7 more people to hit subscribe. So if you're watching right now and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. If there's one thing that I do think is very interesting, because I've been diving into those analytics of YouTube more and more as the weeks go on, as I try to help us grow this page, okay? And that is 70% of the people that are watching our videos are unsubscribed. 30% are subscribed, which is very weird. So those of you that are coming in, I just see someone else just joined as well. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We're providing you with all the best bets content that we can. We're going to be doing that throughout the entire season. So make sure you hit that subscribe, and let's get to 200 before the episode is up today.
I would appreciate that. And I also appreciate this coming in from Rael saying, nice hair, John. And I appreciate that.
I said that before.
Yeah, right before we went live, Ibby complimented me on my my haircut as well. So I appreciate it. Normally I just have a hat on, but when I'm coming from something else, you know, I had to look a little good for that other thing. Go ahead.
There's one thing I see that Rael's in the comments, and I just want to show something real quick. I know she might not like it, but I want to show my nice Carlos Stitch Beltran jersey. I know she's not going to like that, and she's going to hop in the comments real quick, but I had to bust it out so she could see it. My favorite jersey, so I just wanted to just say hi, Rael.
For everybody who knows, Rael is not the biggest fan of Carlos Beltran, but Ibby might actually be the biggest fan of Carlos Beltran. I also am a big supporter of Beltran. And, of course, look, let's get right into it, and, here it is. The news just broke. The Dodgers trade Miguel Rojas from the Marlins. So we're going to break it all down. That is the only thing we're going to talk about today is the Dodgers acquiring utility man and infielder Miguel Rojas. No, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're talking about what could have been with the Mets and Carlos Correa, which is officially not going to happen. The press conference happened. Ibby, I don't think I don't think you can go back from that. I think once you put the jersey on and they introduce you and you sign the contract, I think finally, mercifully, it's done. Carlos Correa is going back to the Twins in baseball obscurity. Let's just call it what it is. They haven't been relevant since the Kirby Puckett. So, it is what it is. But so before we dive into what could have happened, what didn't happen, what maybe went wrong, all of the real nitty gritty, I just want to take your temperature. How do you feel? We've spent a month basically on this show talking about how you and I were very confident this was going to happen. It was going to get done. It didn't get done. Carlos Correa walks away and or the Mets walk away, whatever, but he's not going to be a Met and it is official now. So just everything else aside, just your feelings first.
I just want to say I apologized in our Facebook community because I was very adamant about how I thought things would go. I was adamant on the show. I was adamant on Twitter. Look, I stood tall on something. You stood tall on something. We had our feelings on it. We thought it was a done deal. We thought it was going to eventually get locked up, and it didn't happen. Stood for something, didn't happen, but also standing here the next week and saying, look, we weren't right. It didn't happen. Is what it is. As in terms of how I actually feel, like I said to you before we went live, like I feel fine. And I said before, I'm okay. Like there's no reason I think that Mets fans should be, like we always do, jumping off of a cliff. Or the thing that's really bothering me in terms of the feeling across Mets Twitter and Mets fans in general is the putting down of what this offseason has been to this point because of a long, dragged out saga for the last 3 weeks, really muddying the water, if you will, in terms of what this team did for an offseason. Look, I understand the thought process on another power hitter. We've talked about that on this show in length. I know the worry there about same old lineup, but the way that people are going about this and how they're just discrediting this offseason to this point because of this, I think is improper. But in terms of Carlos Correa just going away, am I frustrated? Sure. Did I want it to happen? Absolutely. Was it an exclamation point for this offseason? 1,000%. You can feel that way. I feel that way. But I can also say to you that the New York Mets are still a damn good baseball team, with or without Carlos Correa. Would they be better with him? 100%. I got some stats we'll talk about in a little bit in comparison to what we have now. But did I want it to happen? Yes. Am I upset? I wouldn't call it upset. A little put off, mainly because I was just tired of the entire saga. I'm happy it's over. But in terms of like, am I losing my mind on Twitter? Am I losing my mind when I'm not, on here with you or on social media? No, I'm fine.
Yeah, and I want to get everybody else's take too, and a few people have already thrown it into the comments, so please keep that coming in. Nothing about breaking down the X's and O's of what went wrong with the deal or what your opinions are. Not yet. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. Just how you're feeling. Chris Torres saying, I'm good, a little disappointed, but I'm still excited about the upcoming season. And Ibby, for me, that's exactly how I feel. Look, and everybody who watches this show, listens to this show, knows that all offseason I've been championing for two people for the Mets to bring in. Aaron Judge, which I understood was a pipe dream. I figured he was probably going to go back to the Yankees. And the fact that the Mets never even got involved in Aaron Judge led me to believe that they knew from jump that he wasn't going to come here and he was going to return to the Bronx. And the other guy was Carlos Correa. I said the Mets should sign Carlos Correa instead of Brandon Nimmo. I said the Mets should have signed Carlos Correa with Brandon Nimmo. Hell, I thought for a second on this show that you and I were both going to be ecstatic because it looked like for a moment they signed Carlos Correa and Brandon Nimmo, and it was going to make us both very, very happy. It was going to lengthen the lineup. So I think it's fair to be disappointed today, yesterday. I think it's fair to be a little frustrated today, yesterday. But to your point, I think fans need to realize that, again, this is a great baseball team. It was one last year. They rebuilt themselves on the fly and have potential to be just as good, if not better. Despite all of the free agents that they had, they worked great and their work still isn't done. There are still some pieces that can help this team that are out there. But yeah, it's a bummer because look, Correa is one of the best postseason players in the history of baseball statistically. So when you look at his resume, he certainly would have helped, but it didn't happen. And so now we have to reset, we have to refocus. And I think it's okay to feel some of those emotions. And I think a lot of people look at it two ways, too dramatically. I think there was a lot of the people out there, Ibby, who looked at it and said, look, we don't need Correa, and other people that are like, oh my God, we desperately need Correa. And I think the middle ground, not to hedge, I think is fair. I think if I stay consistent on what I've said all offseason, I'd like the Mets to get another bat. I think the Mets need, look, I like Adam Duvall. I like Trey Mancini. I like some of these guys who are still out there that can be had, right? But none of them are Carlos Correa. I think the Mets needed a player like Correa. Now they're not going to have him, so that part is a bummer. But I also don't think when I use that word need, I use it loosely because we're looking at, basically the top lineup in the NL returning from last year. I know that lineup had its warts. I know that lineup had its problems, but they were one of the best lineups in baseball over the course of 162. Did they shut down at the worst possible time in September? Yeah. Yes. Were they even worse in the playoff series against the Padres? Yes. But that shouldn't undo all the goodwill that they built over the course of a long season. So I kind of stand right in the middle. I kind of look at it as Correa would have been a great finishing piece, an exclamation point, a cherry on top, whatever thing you want to use to describe it. But to me, he would have been a little bit more than that because I do think the Mets needed a presence like his in the lineup on a regular basis. And so for that reason, I'm a little disappointed yesterday and today.
Also, to your point before, and I know people always harp on this when it comes to September and the record and the lineup and how things might be different this year. It's like, well, I could also say to you that if Starling Marte was healthy, I guarantee that the Mets would have won 2 more games. Like I truly believe that if he was healthy, they would have won 2 more games. They win a division. Then who knows what happens? But we'll never know. It's ancient history. Now we're moving forward. But yeah, another thing I don't like, and you can have your feelings, right? You can have yours. I can have mine. Mets fans are going to have their feelings regardless. Okay. The one thing that's bothering me is when it's jumping on one side or the other to the extreme, like you just mentioned. And I'm bringing this up because it's like, I don't like when people see that Correa's going elsewhere and it's like, oh, screw Correa. Correa sucks. Never needed him. We got Eduardo Escobar. We got Brett Baty. Look, I like Escobar. I talked about last week.
That's a terrible take. People who say that are insane.
I have no problem with Eduardo Escobar. I wanted him to stay. I did not want to trade. I mentioned that last week. I love Brett Baty. I was ready to talk about this week potentially about Brett Baty playing left field, but that's not going to be the issue anymore because he'll be at third base. But I want to give a quick shout out for these stats because I was really going to bring these to the table if Correa was going to be here, but they still fit this because I don't like when people just bash a player because they think, oh, well, we didn't need him anyway. Shout out to Matt Musico on Twitter. Okay, so and this is all based off of projections for this year. Projections aren't the Bible. They're not the end all be all. It's not what. So again, just projections. But for 548 plate appearances, Eduardo Escobar is projected for a 232, 292, 417 slash line. Okay, that equals about a 96 OPS plus. Okay, in comparison. I should also throw in the fact that he would have a -2 defensive rating, which would give him about a 1.5 F-WAR. In comparison, Carlos Correa, if he was here, would have brought to you 265, 347, 451, 23 homers, 25 doubles, 75 RBIs, a 122 OPS plus, big difference there. And his WAR would have been 5.4 because his defensive rating would have been a +13. So there's a huge difference there. So I don't like when people just automatically jump on it and say, oh, we didn't need him. It's like, no, that would have been a difference maker. That would have been something. So it's not proper to just say that it wasn't needed. And to your point before, when it comes to that postseason that we're missing out on now, his postseason stats across 334 plate appearances, 272, 344, 505, 59 RBIs, 37 runs, and 18 postseason career homers. So it's like, you can't sit there and tell me that he wasn't good. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I'm not going to say it doesn't suck that he's not here. It does, but it's not going to deter me from saying that this team isn't good enough. This team is good enough. And here's the thing that people need to understand. Stop thinking that just because you were underwhelmed by Billy Epler's trade deadline from this previous year doesn't mean that he's going to strike out again in your eyes this upcoming year. There are avenues to get players. I said this 2 weeks ago when this whole thing started going down, how people were putting too much on the idea of signing someone that was left in the free agent pool, like there still are players, and thinking that they're going to provide this crazy spark for you. They're going to fill out the roster. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. They fill out the roster. They do what they're supposed to do. You hit the deadline, and then you assess and try to attack and fill in the gaps where you need it. That's what's going to happen here. I hate the fact that people just assume that the lineup that you're going to get on opening day is going to be the lineup that you're going to have the entire year. There are places you could go. There are things you can do. We just don't know them at this particular moment. Players become available. Teams fall out of it. There's going to be moves made. Relax.
Yeah, no, I want to jump back into the comments. Got a lot coming in. We've kind of been ignoring them as we were giving our take over the last couple of minutes. But this one, the most important one for me, from Carlos. Can we get Ibby's dog's take? Seems like he wants to express himself. I think we all know how Ibby's dog feels about F War. As soon as Ibby mentioned that, he was like, no, don't talk about F War. It's not a viable stat. No, of course, I'm kidding. That's all that stuff is very well taken as far as the difference between a guy like Escobar and a guy like Correa and what they bring to the table. Just checking in with everybody else, trying to take the temperature of the room, seeing how people feel. Stevie Mack saying all this does is fuel Cohen to either go big at the deadline or in the offseason next year. We can talk about that for sure. Shay saying it stung, but it is what it is. Happy the saga is over. Now we can pay attention to the people who are actually on, I'm adding that in, actually on the roster.
We're actually here.
And what we have to move on to next. Chris saying, I was fine with it falling through, but I was surprised it did. I totally agree with that.
Agreed.
And then Chris Torres following it up saying, Mets interested in McCutchen. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great move. Yep. Me and Ibby talked about it a little bit last week. We'll talk more about it today. James Dowling saying, happy to have more money for the future. I mean, yeah, look, guys, this is probably a second half of the show conversation, but if the Mets are willing to spend $300 million plus on Correa and then still be in the market for Ohtani, well, what makes you think the Mets won't be willing to potentially, if they need to, right? If Beatty's not the guy or if Beatty doesn't develop or whatever, what makes you think they won't spend $300 million on Machado and then also sign Ohtani? I know that's a lot to do in one offseason, but I don't know. They were going to do it this year. So to me, it's not crazy. Then we look at Carlos Ramos saying, I'm actually very impressed that Cohen didn't just spend like a drunken sailor. He obviously could have paid whatever he wanted to, but he said F you to Boris, and the disingenuous tactics were good. I think it's Ibby. The best part of that is that he listened to his front office. He listened to his baseball people. He trusted that they knew more than him potentially. He easily could have spent that money. He could have just done it. He basically did the deal without Epler. So he could have done it and just been like, guys, I don't care. But he listened to the people who know, and he went with it. And I totally agree with that. Rael saying we were happy before we got Correa. It was drunk Cohen late night bonus. That because it was a 3-week saga drags down the positives. I totally agree with some of that. Chris saying I don't buy into, we'll get Machado or Ohtani next season. Because we have this season as a win now group.
I get that.
Dive into that coming up in a little bit for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, there's plenty of great stuff to talk about here, Ibby. So what I want to focus on next is where the deal for you. Now, this is not you or me having insider information, where the deal for you fell apart. And keep those comments coming in. We're going to jump into them. But what was it that made it seem like they were doing it? And then we had some pretty reliable sources, a la Carlos Baerga and John Mincone and all these guys saying, hey, look, I don't know if it's real, but like somebody I trust told me this Mets deal could get done tomorrow. And what happened tomorrow was that he signed with the Twins. So it all moved pretty quick after moving at a snail's pace for 3 weeks.
For me, I mean, in that moment, I never got off the fact that I thought that the Mets were always going to give the most money. And then seeing what happened after the fact, seeing, okay, he's going back with the Twins. He lost more money in overall cash and guarantees or whatever. And then seeing where the divide within the language came down to the guarantees. And it was the front end guarantees, because when you look at it, it's like, well, the Mets still offered him $315 million.
Correct.
The parameters of the deal, except it was, look, I'm going to guarantee you half of this, And then you can get the rest of this as long as you're healthy. If you're healthy, all the money's yours. That's it. Cut and dry. The front end had $40+ million more guaranteed, but less on the overall. So this is my thought process. I mentioned it when I put on my little tinfoil hat a couple weeks ago, talking about the players union and all this stuff. I always think it comes down to the guarantees, and Scott Boras is always going to protect the players union as well. Mm-hmm. It was the upfront guaranteed money. You get as much as you can guaranteed into your pocket, then you can play that game. The fact is, the Twins guaranteed $200 million, the Mets guaranteed $156 million, cut the original offer in half, right down the middle. And he said, you're going to the place that gives you the more guaranteed money, even though it's less on the full end. You're going to go to a place that gives you the more guarantees. I think that is Boras. I think that is protecting the players union, because it's always about getting that bottom line filled as much as they can. The guarantees were there. That's where the whole thing in the language falls apart, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for me, I don't disagree. We talked about it a couple weeks ago where we said the difference is why we didn't see another team getting back in, because it was like, well, why wouldn't the Mets just match that deal? If we're talking 6 years, why wouldn't the Mets just do it? If we're talking 5 years, why wouldn't the Mets just do it? Why wouldn't you give them the opportunity? But I like to see the fact that the Mets were kind of steadfast in like, look, we want you to be a Met for a very long time.
Yes.
We have no interest in signing you to a $200 million 6-year deal. We want to sign you to the deal we agreed upon, 12 years, $315.
Yeah.
But we have to protect ourselves along the way. And that really has to do greatly with one of the comments I just saw from Chris Torres saying, it's nice to see an owner with deep pockets, but spending it wisely. Yes. Very impressive. I think that's the important part to look at, where the Mets were like, look, we want to do this deal. So that's why I totally agree with you. I think it comes down to Boras. I think it comes down to the players union. I don't think it comes down to, look, I know what he said at the press conference today. My heart was here. Listen, man, you can't believe both. His heart was either there or he jumped into Boras's arms when he found out he was going to play with Lindor in New York, right? So where's his heart really? You're going to say stuff like that at press conferences. So, for me, when I look at the scope of the situation, I just think the Mets weren't willing, for their own interest, to modify the deal to that degree. Like, obviously, Steve Cohen could have given him the Twins deal, but I don't think they saw the benefit in all of that guaranteed money for that short amount of time. I think they looked at it and they said, look, we gave you 12 for $315. Here's 6 for $156.5 or whatever the math is, totally in half, like you said. And then after that, we're going to give you the opportunity to earn all that money back. We want you to be here. We want you to be healthy. We want you to play baseball. We want you to be a part of this team. And if you do that, you're going to make the same deal that we agreed upon when I was in Hawaii over the holidays getting drunk with my family. To him, he didn't want to do it because probably Boras, probably because of the players union. But Ibby, you have to look at this for a little bit and say maybe he's not willing to bet on himself, because maybe the ankle is in bad shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then if there's, I'm going to continue off of that in a second, but one thing that needs to be said, Mets fans, baseball fans, stop thinking that it's always going to come down to winning. It is never about the winning. Very rarely do you see it about the winning aspect. Players want money. That is it. Players want top dollar. So when I say, so he's gonna go play and make his money and he's never gonna win, it's like, he doesn't care. He's making his money. He's making his guaranteed money. That's it. That's all it comes down to. And another thing, it's like, you look at a player, and I wrote this down because I sent it to a buddy in a text, or a couple of friends in a group chat, I think. And I said this, and it's crazy when you write it down. It's like, so the original offer, $350 million over 13 years, guaranteed. That was it. Fails the physical. Okay. So off of the original offer from the Giants, he signs here for $200 million. Right? Here we go. Here's the breakdown. Perfect. Beautiful. My guy, he's reading my mind. Unless the year vests and he actually gets to the 10 years and 270, overall, he loses $80 million. Okay. So it's crazy to think and I joked with you yesterday we were on the phone. It's like he goes from San Francisco to New York. Now he's living in cold Minnesota, and he lost $150 million along the way.
Yeah,
yes,
what's the opposite of a glow up? Because that's what happened to Carlos Correa.
It's a huge glow down, and it's like he lost all this money, and the public. And look, he can smile all he wants because he still got his contract in the end, not the one he probably wanted. But to also bring it back to what you said before, the tackling aspect of Boris, he tackled Boris because he said, I had $350 million and I failed a physical, and you still got me a $300 million contract. That's why he tackled him. It is not because of Francisco Lindor. It is not because of the New York Mets. He's just saying, holy shit, my guy got me $300 million, even though I failed a physical. Let's go. And it didn't work, and you lost all that cash. But again, it is what it is. You move forward. The New York Mets are still good.
I want to jump back into the comments. A lot of them coming in, and we appreciate that. Keep them coming. I know that you guys are oftentimes talking to each other in the comments as well. We try to shout out and highlight as many as we can. Yeah. This one from AJ. I think the trade deadline is where we will see the front office make up for this. Hard to be mad at New York. If they spent that money and he was injury plagued, would have never let it go. And that's fair. That seems to be the sentiment. This is not, we talked about it last week. This is not a case where the Mets attempted to sign, and I air quote so hard that my fingers might break off, Vladimir Guerrero. And then they balked at the back issue. This is not that. This is not the Mets attempting to sign A-Rod and then being like, well, he wants a corner office and a jet. Who cares? You're a baseball team. You don't have a spare office at Shea Stadium at the time? Of course you do. Yes. I've been inside baseball stadiums. We all have. You know how many offices there are? There's like a million of them. Give it to him. Who cares? This is not that. If it was money only, it would have been done because it was done for that. So I look at it, and we talked about it last week. Tim Ryder, who does great Mets content in his own right, has been a guest on this show, also talked about it, Ibby. The Mets basically bargained their way into a 3-week window of exclusivity where they, and only they, for the most part, could negotiate with Carlos Correa. In today's day and age for baseball, that is unheard of. Guys no longer do you see the Johan Santana traded to the Mets kind of deal where you trade him and you have 72 hours to negotiate an exclusive extension. You don't see that anymore. That stuff is very few and far between. The Mets basically savvied their way into an exclusivity window because they had the holidays built in, because they knew that there was going to be a little bit of tumultuousness going on with this failed physical or what was going on behind it. So they did a great thing here. The only thing that didn't work is that in the end, they couldn't bridge the gap. And if you want to throw a little bit of flack in another direction, you know what? Cohen probably shouldn't have said anything about it before it happened. But he was excited. He was in Hawaii. He was drinking. I've been excited. I've been on islands. I've been drinking. If I owned the Mets and it was a team that I grew up rooting for and I was worth $17.5 billion like him, I probably wouldn't be able to keep my mouth shut either. Because you know what? I live in an apartment now and I still can't keep my mouth shut. So
you just stole my joke.
So I don't really blame the guy, so much, especially because, again, you're not talking about disingenuous comments. You're not talking about guys sitting here going, well, I don't really know if the Mets are going to bring him in. I don't know if he's very aggressive, assertive. Go for it. Yes. So to me, it sucks to put a cap on this whole part of the conversation. It's a little bit of a bummer. It is. But like AJ said, like a lot of people have said in the comments, Ibby, I think we're going to see them round out the team here with another bat, probably somebody who can play the outfield. I think you're going to see a reliever or two. And look, this team needs to win now, right? You don't invest $86 million in two 40-year-old pitchers if you're not trying to win now. But they're going to find somebody, whether it's at the deadline, whether a trade pops in their lap in the next couple of weeks, we don't know about. We don't know who's available. They're going to get somebody. They will, because it's Steve Cohen and he gets what he wants. So I don't know. I'm not worried because they're already a great baseball team on paper. And I know you said this when the deal first got announced, potential deal with the Mets. It's not even about Correa. It's the fact that Steve Cohen will not be stopped. If he needs something, if he wants something, if he thinks he wants to go get something, he just goes and gets it. So I think that trend will continue.
Yeah, and I think, I understand like the initial shock of everything and him going back to the Twins and everything, but it is what it is. And if there's one thing I can bring up to just try and calm Mets fans when it comes to just the player in general and the thought process of Carlos Correa, as I laugh at some of the comments that I see in there, specifically you, Stevie Mac, about his age and the way he looks. But just thinking about Carlos Correa and the fact that it's been, I laughed at that. That was a good one. The fact that it's been, when you look at it at a whole, not even just this whole freaking saga of this offseason, you go back to the last one. Have we seen a guy of this magnitude, really, of a star player who has struggled the way he has to truly lock in a long-term deal? You thought he was going to get it last year, and nobody bit. Legit, nobody bit. And then Minnesota came in. And then this happens. And
you wonder who saw the medicals last year and balked at it.
And you wonder about some of those things. So it's like, this guy has had a hard time. And this, again, someone sees this, you're going to be like, oh, this guy's coping or whatever. It's like, no, it's not that. It's like, it's literally talking it out and, using our brains here for, I know a lot of people don't do that, but we actually like to use our brains here and talk things out. But yeah, we try. But it's wild to think that this guy had such a hard time over the last 2 years, truly locking in a long-term deal. And, it makes you question some things. That's the only thing I'm going to bring up. So relax, Mets fans. You're going to be good.
Yeah, listen, I think now's a good time to take a break. Obviously, we've got plenty more to talk about where the Mets can go from here. I also do want to call out a couple people, and there was a few people in the comments that were calling some people out as well. So for everybody who's watching this live, you already know the drill. The break is just a few seconds. It's because the audio version of the show needs a few ads that we don't do here on the live version. So it's John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Tilt Mets Do Us Part. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Tilt Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, albeit a little bit later than we normally are. Basically, my fault, and I apologize for that, but we still have plenty of comments coming in, plenty of folks watching, and we appreciate it. And of course, speaking of watching and commenting, the best way to make sure that you can do all of that is to tune in live when we go live. And the best way to make that happen is to subscribe and turn notifications on over on our YouTube channel. So if we go live at a different time or do an emergency episode, anything like that, you do get the alerts. But of course, we understand that not everybody can do that all the time. So if you subscribe to the channel, you can still watch it as soon as we're done with the broadcast. The entire episode lives on our YouTube channel forever. And like Stevie Mac says, hit that like button. It helps.
Please hit the like button.
Analytics so much. And if you can't do any of that, and you want to listen to this show instead, you can do all of that starting tomorrow. The audio version of the podcast drops courtesy of the Chop Sports Network, wherever it is you get your podcast. So, Ibby, there's a few people here that have mentioned some people they had beef with. Obviously we talk about, there's always that Greg Palms guy. There's Frank the Tank. And Chris has brought up this person a few times. I know this is near and dear to you. Guys,
my God.
I'm going to try to read. Guys, who the hell is Joe and Clark? He means in Clark.
In Clark.
LMFAO, dude has to be related to Frank the Tank. Those two together, wow. Poison. So, Ibby.
I'm poison, but yeah, but still.
Well, yeah. But listen, we have a lot of issues with a lot of these people that put out things just to put them out.
God.
Joe and Clark's got a lot of dumb things to say. And I think I try to tune it out, but I think in this instance, because of the strangeness of this situation, I think it's fair to call these people out for some of the nonsense that has gone on. There's Joe and Clark. Oh, all right. Well, there you go, guys. You see Ibby's take right there.
Bozo, don't listen to this idiot. It's sad because I was talking with someone about him the other day on Twitter. It's like, it's sad because people like him, people like Frank, they get the louder microphone because people want Mets fans to be jokes because everyone wants the Mets to be a joke. So they just latch on to people like that and just say, look, the Mets are a clown show. Put the 10 up or whatever. It's like, no, Those people are idiots. Those people want to be miserable. It is a new era, okay? Don't feed these idiots, okay? You read his feed for a minute, you're going to lose your IQ points. He's stupid. Don't listen to him. Don't read him. Block him. Feels great.
That's a very aggressive take.
I'm sorry.
I have an equally aggressive take, and I haven't run this by my partner yet, so I don't know how he's going to feel about it. He usually calls me out when I mention this. I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it Jenny? Is it Genny? I'm not sure.
It's Jenny.
Okay, Jenny, Geny Mets, that
Jenny
whole
Mets,
handle.
yes.
Okay, listen, guys, I know a lot of you follow that dude, right? I get it. I understand he's been on Twitter as a Mets Twitter person for a while. I had a huge beef with the fact that him and some thing that's not even a show called Metcast Pod or something like that isn't even a show that exists. We're doing a Carlos Correa jersey giveaway. Okay. They did it because they wanted to be first. They did it because they wanted to get people to follow them on Twitter. And look, we do giveaways on Twitter. We do giveaways on Instagram.
I got one planned.
We've done it to get followers on Twitter. We've done it to get subscribers on YouTube. I got no beef with that. It's all part of the fun. You guys get something. We get something. It's all great. Ibby, for me, I cannot deal with the fact that you're going to sit there and you're going to try to do a giveaway of a player who's not yet on the team, especially since all of this nonsense was surrounding the situation. This wasn't a situation of like, oh, Justin Verlander's in St. Bart's or Bora Bora or whatever the hell he was with his supermodel wife, right?
Yeah.
It's not that. It's like, no, there's a real concern. And there was a real concern with the last deal he signed, and there's a real concern with this one. And I'm not saying anything to you and to these fans and the people who watch and listen to us that I haven't already said to Jenny, because I've tweeted at him a million times. I think that is Bush League hack nonsense. Okay, you want to do giveaways? Do giveaways. But I think people called me at the end of last season when I was trying to champion for people to rally around that Mets team. People said I was toxically positive, that my viewpoints were so over the top because I was trying to support the team. Right. This guy's saying he's trying to speak this into existence by doing a giveaway. And then, by the way, Carlos Correa signs with the Twins. All of a sudden, the giveaway goes down. There's no apology. There's no my bad Mets fans. There's no like, listen, we wish it would have turned out. We're just trying to do something nice. Nothing. Just as if it never happened. And to me, that is embarrassing hack nonsense.
Yeah, look, I know you were very, very much on this from the jump, and I guess the main reason why it would just bother me is the main reason why something like that would like, bother me is because, like you said, it's the give and get. It's like I'm giving away autographed memorabilia in exchange for followers, likes, retweets, whatever, just to try and grassroots this thing and continue doing it. Like, that's the give and go. It's like, I'm giving something because you're giving me something. So it's like, we all win, or you get a chance, at least getting a chance to win something. And then the idea that I'm sure that garnered like thousands of followers, and then there's not even a shot that anybody even wins. It's like, well, you basically you swindled people in a way to better your page, and there's no payoff. So if anything, if it was me doing that, I would, if I pulled it down, I would then apologize and then give something else away.
Yeah, like there's other players who have actually played for the Mets.
Right. You can do a different jersey, or you can do something like that and do right. Like that's where I get bothered by it. But I'm not going to attack the guy like John does.
Listen, I don't care. I'm a menace on Twitter. Sometimes I have too much. Sometimes I'm busy and I don't have the chance to do it. And I'll like start to type a tweet. And then it's like cathartic for me to just see the words like, you goddamn idiot, written out. And then I'm like, okay, I don't have to send it. I'll just delete it. But sometimes I really have to just go hard. And look, a lot of people are agreeing with me as far as this goes. Agreeing with you too, as far as Joe and Clark. Rail saying mute button activate. Then we've got Patty and NYC throwing out a couple comments. Sorry for not getting to them. Oh yeah, I unfollowed Genny last week, or Jenny, whatever the hell. Carlos saying, yes, John, yes, full with the giveaway joined by Metscast Pod. You can't make this up. And then Rael saying, that was classic, John. You're trolling them was my favorite part of yesterday. I basically was like, if you guys don't follow me, like, hey, what happened to that giveaway? I'm dying to know who won. I want to know. I really want to know who won that giveaway. It's been eating me up. I really want to know. Even when he first started doing it, I was just like, hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but, you know, there was a time when the Mets traded Robin Ventura for David Justice, and he never actually played a game as a Met. So if you want to give away a jersey next, maybe you could do that one, the David Justice Mets jersey. Idiots, man. Anyway, so thank you for indulging me as far as all that stuff goes. You and the fans. I know that's like people don't necessarily want me to just start yelling like crazy. Oh, this is the greatest comment to cap this off, and then we can go back to on the field baseball stuff. Chris Torres, at least Jed Lowry actually got to wear the jersey. Yeah, give away a Jed Lowry jersey.
Jed Lowry,
yeah. And the best part about a Jed Lowry game-used jersey is that it's brand new. So,
it's clean, baby. It's clean.
It's clean. You can wear that thing to the club. Nobody would know the difference. So, okay, Ibby, all jokes aside, we move on to what the Mets can do next. We heard some stuff. Let's not talk about the potential pipe dreams. Like, look, there's the report that, yeah, the potential availability of Manny Machado makes it a little easier for them to walk away from this deal. Sure, no beef with that. But that's a 2024 move. That's not a here and now.
We're trying to win now. Yeah.
So we've got some people that the Mets can bring in. You see the rumors with McCutchen. Mm-hmm. You see, you know, we talked last week about Chafin, about Fulmer. There's some smoke to the Zach Britton stuff, which I would love that. Zach Britton, like that, former closer. No, he hasn't been healthy, but you know, he's another guy like Robertson who can pitch in the late innings. Yeah. And he's another lefty. So I think he scratches a couple different areas. So where would you go next if you were the Mets?
Rounding out phase, like I've said before, looking at this list here again, I still think
this is the same list from last week, by the way. I believe there's one or two guys who are no longer available as of a couple days ago. Nelson Cruz signed today with San Diego, and a couple days ago, I believe AJ Pollock signed. But I just didn't have the time because of what I was doing to update this. So, and I think Marwin Gonzalez is playing in like Correa or something. So.
Oh, well, good for him. But yeah, it's I still think that Adam Duvall fits from the outfield perspective. I like I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I think Andrew McCutchen could be a fit not only on the field but in the clubhouse as well. And I want to see that guy play some postseason baseball, and I think he can do that here in New York. But I think that those guys make a lot of sense. More, I know a lot of people like Mancini. I think he could maybe, but I really think that they're going to go after an outfielder. I think that's the route that they're going to go. And I know he's played the outfield, but like.
He's not really an outfielder.
Like an outfielder, you know.
Yeah,
that's what I think they're going to do.
I look at Adam Duvall as a guy who can still play the outfield. Yeah. I look at McCutchen as a guy who, because of how elite he was in center field at one point, you could probably stick him out there in left or right field every once in a while, and he'd be all right. I think Mancini's a tier down from that. I think Mancini's a true DH first baseman. If you're putting him out in the outfield, you're just kind of hoping he doesn't screw up for 6 or 7 innings, a la what they were doing when they were trying to get Darren Ruff at bats. I'm sorry for mentioning that guy's name. But what they were doing with him towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and look, there's still the avenue that they could go, and they could call up someone to try and make a trade for an outfielder. Like I still think, we're talking about Minnesota. I still think Max Kepler is a possibility, and I would love to have that as a potential fit here. I think that'd be a great move. Question is what the price would be, but I think that is still something that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think that's what you're kind of looking at. I really feel that we are in a rounding out phase. I still think that they can look at more bullpen arms, like you mentioned before. I think Britton fits. I think that could be the move potentially. We've mentioned Chafin, but I really don't know if anyone's even talking about that guy. So who knows what's going on with him? Maybe he wants too much. He had the year left in Detroit. Maybe he wants 2-3 years. No one's willing to give it to him. But I think that this is clearly going to be the rounding out portion. Maybe an extra bullpen arm. Maybe a potential trade for an outfielder if they're not going to just outright sign an outfielder, and then they're going to go to battle with that. That's what I think they're going to do. I don't like that people automatically have jumped to this next big idea of, oh my God, they didn't get Correa, so it's like, oh, now who's the next big guy we can trade for? Can they get Ohtani now? Are they gonna give away all those prospects for Brian Reynolds? It's like, no, I don't think that they are. I think they're going to stay the course. I think that they saw Correa as a guy that was, again, things were falling apart. They figured, let's jump in. Maybe we can steal something here. It
Plus,
didn't
no
happen.
qualifying offer for Correa.
Plus no qualifying offer. And it's like, you know what? Let's take a shot. Didn't work out. Doesn't matter. I do not think that they are going to just blow everything up for one move to try and save face like many people think that they need to do because this didn't happen. Stay the course, round out the roster, get a bat, get a bullpen arm, let's go, and then attack this again at the deadline.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think if the situation was slightly different, I think you could see a pivot where the Mets could not blow up the farm, but give a lot of pieces away to go get that bat right here, right now. I think if you knew Ohtani was available, the Mets do that. I think if, for some reason last year, but he's not, right? Like Ohtani's not going to be available now. He might be available in June or July, but he's not going to be available now.
Right.
I think if Soto was never dealt and Soto was going to be on the market, I think you could see the Mets trying to go all in there. If Devers doesn't sign that extension, I think you could see them trying to go all in there. You look around the league, there's not a lot of candidates right now. Go back a year, somebody who I think would have fit the Mets even better than Carlos Correa, and that's Jose Ramirez. If Jose Ramirez didn't sign that extension in Cleveland, I think he's an option. But right now, today, none of these players are options. The one that everybody keeps going back to is Brian Reynolds. To me, Brian Reynolds makes sense if the Mets didn't re-sign Brandon Nimmo. Then you look at it. I don't think that Brian Reynolds, he's a good ball player. I don't think he gives the Mets what they need right now. He certainly doesn't fit the team the way Correa or Judge did in terms of a big bat. And also, Ibby, to your point, he's not going to be worth the cost of acquisition. Now, that is not a knock on him as a player. Absolutely not. But when you're talking about what you have to give up to get Brian Reynolds, when you already, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, have a middle of the road farm system, 12 to 15, depending on which ranking you like, right? You're not going to be able to trade multiple pieces for Brian Reynolds and then try to trade for Ohtani if he becomes available in July. It's not going to happen. You cannot. I know everybody wants the team to have a different look on offense than they had last year. I was one of the biggest champions for that, of get me one more bat, and I agree with that premise. Brian Reynolds ain't it. Brian Reynolds is not that guy. Not when you have Nimmo at the top of the lineup, and you're followed by Marte, or you're followed by McNeil, or you're followed by Lindor, whatever, machination of the top 3 or 4 that you want to go to before you get to Pete at 5. So to me, none of those guys are realistic options because there isn't one. So you have to be realistic here. The one thing I will say before I throw it back to you and jump into the comments, because a lot of comments are coming in about this. Before, when I thought we were going to get Correa, I thought the Mets needed one more bat to be that bench piece. I kept saying Duvall. Now, I think I'd like to see, especially if this process drags out and guys aren't getting paid a lot of money or a lot in terms of a couple of years on deals, maybe you get one on a 1-year deal. I'd like to see the Mets maybe get 2 bats. If you told me they would get, Duvall and Profar or Duvall and Mancini, I like that better than just going and getting one of those guys.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. I think a lot of these guys, it's also going to be dependent on what they're searching for in terms of like potential playing time and age and all those things come into effect. But yeah, I think if they were able to and willing to make a move for 2 people, again, there's going to have to be some movement amongst amongst the rosters to try and make space. Maybe that's when things get freed up in a potential trade if they went somewhere else for maybe a bullpen arm or a bullpen piece in general. Yeah, I think that is something that makes a lot of sense, and it could happen. And I would be all for it. I just think I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to go 1 bat, 1 arm, and then that's what they're going to do. And then they're going to put a little bit more on the likes of Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez in due time. And I think that's the route that they're going to choose to go, and then see where they're at and then attack it come the deadline.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of people are saying the stuff, similar sentiment. Trey Mancini is a Buck guy. Obviously, he can give Pete a rest at first, which I'm very concerned about him needing. He can DH and then fill in. And a lot of people have really seconded that point. Rael saying, I agree. They may need to give Pete some rest. You see that a lot. Chris saying in general, Chris Torres, Mancini, Duvall, or McCutchen is okay with me. I agree on all of that. And then you look at some of the other, here's Rael following up on the point. Pete was wiped at the end of last season. Lindor has some people to cover him, and Pete doesn't. And we talked about how that was why Correa was such a great fit.
Yes,
all of a sudden,
100%.
now, look, I love Luis Guillorme. He's a defensive wizard. He's a great shortstop. He's not Lindor. Well, you know what? Correa's Lindor, that would have been great.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you sit Lindor one day, you move Correa over to shortstop. To me, that's why the move made so much sense. And Chris saying Pete and Lindor definitely need another bat to help. And I think that's the crux of everybody's argument right now is that, there needs to be, one singular little piece. And I don't know, it's not Vogelback by himself. I like Vogelback against righties, hitting in the 5 spot, offering a lot of power. He hits the ball very hard against right-handed pitching, and he's got a lot of pop. I like him protecting Pete in certain situations, but you're going to need a complement for him. And, that's why you start to look at Duvall, you start to look at Mancini, and the kids are going to have to step up. Beatty, Alvarez. Now, this is not a knock on them, Ibby. I like both. I love Alvarez. I like Beatty very, very, very much if I had to go 1 and 1A, right? But I think you're looking at 2 guys who have 50 total major league at bats.
I get it.
This is the conversation I was having with people on Twitter. They're like, you got to give the kids a shot. No, you don't. You have to try to win a World Series. And to go back to my point from the first half, when you've got $86 million invested in 2 40-year-old starting pitchers, you don't have to give the kids a chance. Let them force their way onto the roster the way Pete did. And I think both of them are capable of doing it. Do I think in spring training, Beatty can beat out Escobar for the third base job? Absolutely. I think he's talented enough, and I think he's basically ready. Do I think Alvarez is going to make them rethink the fact that they, have Nito and Narvaez? I do. I think he absolutely could.
He's speaking confidently, that's for
sure. He's speaking confidently. He's saying all the right things. So when I look at that, I want to see them force it. I don't want to see them like, oh, well, we have to have the guy who's never caught at the major league level. He just DH. We have to have him be our catcher. No, not on a team that's trying to be one of the best teams in baseball and win a World Series. We're not just looking at being competitive. We're looking at being the best team. And you have to let those guys force your hand.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of the forcing hand aspect, because I know a lot of people always jump at the idea of, emulating the Braves model and letting the kids play. And look, I've said on the show before, I'm fine to an extent of letting the kids play and letting them get that experience, but it's also dependent on how you build a team. And the way that the Mets have chosen to build a team is to truly invest in legit veteran in terms of age pitchers, where it's like, okay, well, can we afford, when we have the age that we do at the top of our lineup, and you worry about health and things breaking down and wanting to get the most out of every single thing that you can from those guys in the short amount of time you have them, can you trust the give and go of what a rookie player might be going through? Are you going to allow that to potentially be a hole at the end of your lineup, like we saw hurt this team last year when 7, 8, 9 became basically automatic outs, and we got rid of some of those pieces, and hopefully, the ones that come in can do better. But that's where I think the questioning that people automatically dismiss and saying, well, no, you got to let the kids play. It's like, no, you can. I'm not saying you don't. You can let them play, but understand why people are so hesitant, because of the fact that, the team is built in such a veteran aspect that you want ready-made things and not trying to go through those ups and downs. A player needs it. A young player needs playing time. I get that. But that's where I think Mets fans kind of differ in that sense.
I agree. Shea makes a good point about players available, or that he wishes was available, rather. And that is, I wish Ketel Marte was available. I think it's a pipe dream. I agree. Would be a good backup. Yeah. Can play second, short, center field, outfield, but it's unrealistic. I think that's another one of those players, unrealistic right now. It's the same situation of like, if the Angels are terrible, they should trade Ohtani, period. Like completely, they should.
Unless the new owner comes in and is like, I'm going to keep this guy. Like that's the only way that they won't. But yes, I'm with you. They should deal him now. But they won't, because they don't want to deal with the backlash. But I'm with you on that 100%.
Yeah, and then obviously there's some there's some back and forth here. I think a report came out, and that's what Chris is alluding to. Didn't know English was a concern for Alvarez.
I saw that. Yeah,
that was the report that was like, hey, he said his defense is ready. He just needed to work on his English better so that he can communicate with the entire staff as far as being a catcher. And then Stevie Mack saying, did they bring in Omar Narvaez, that is, to help Lindor learn to communicate with English-speaking players? That's one expensive tutor, LOL. I think it's all the above, maybe. I actually think, they're fellow countrymen, so I think that's a factor. Obviously, they speak the same language, so I think that's a factor. You're looking at Narvaez being a veteran who had to, I'm sure, deal with some of the same stuff that the Mets are looking for Alvarez to deal with, which is communicating with a pitching staff, not only in the same language, but just in general, the way every catcher needs to learn that. I think Narvaez is a good catcher defensively, and I also think he makes it so that two things. One, the Mets could trade James McCann, which they did and everybody wanted and everybody needed to see happen. But then you're not left with a situation where it's Tomas Nido and Alvarez, and that's it. Right. The Mets have set themselves up in a situation where, if Alvarez forces his way on the team, he's on the team. If he doesn't, he can go to AAA, and you've got a catching tandem that works better, I think, than James McCann and Tomas Nido ever did, because Narvaez has more pop and he's left-handed. So I think all of that is all mixed into the Omar Narvaez signing.
Yeah, I definitely think that that definitely plays a part in terms of the overall growth of Francisco Alvarez. And look, we talked about it at length about how if Francisco Alvarez is going to be on this team, he has to catch. You don't want to stunt that growth. He has to catch. So if it happened, I think he's going to start, unless he does what you said, and that's go the Pete route. It's just like he just blows the doors off of everyone. He's handling the staff, and it's like he basically forces him way onto the opening day start. Like, outside of that happening, I believe he will be in AAA, catching every day, playing every day. And then hopefully, as we get through the first month of the season, the moment that there is that first question of lack of power, and if he's like tearing the cover off the ball, he'll be up, and then that's going to be it. Like, you're going to see him every day. He'll get spells where he'll DH, but for the most part, he'll be catching every day. That will happen. I do believe that.
Yeah, because like we talked about on that episode a few weeks ago, it comes down to the fact that, look, Alvarez projects as a 20 to 30 home run guy, which I'm not saying is something to sneeze at, right? He makes loud contact, he hits the ball hard. Yeah. For a catcher, that is excellent. For a full-time DH, not so much. For full-time DH, you got to be Yordan Alvarez. You got to be Pete Alonso. You got to be, 35, 40, 45 home run power. Yeah. Otherwise, and I'm not saying it all comes down to power, right? Obviously, that's not the be-all, end-all.
Other things, but
you could be a guy that hits 30 home runs and also, hits 280, and you could be a DH because you're driving in a lot of runs. I understand there's more than one way to skin a cat. I just mean, to your point, Alvarez has all of his value because of the position he does it at. You look at Joe Mauer, right? Joe Mauer, excellent catcher, unbelievable, the batting titles, all this stuff he did. Once Joe Mauer started playing first base.
Oh, forget about it. $180 million singles hitter. That's what he was.
I mean, okay, I understand he's going to hit. At that point, he wasn't even a 330, 340 hitter. He was like a 300 hitter, which, again, I'm not shitting on, but he was a 300 hitter who would hit 11 home runs a year and bat third for $180 million. Yeah. Now, if you're a catcher who's hitting second or third in front of Justin Morneau, who's going to hit 40 home runs, you can hit 340 and 15, and it's incredible. But if you're playing first base, that shit ain't going to fly. So it's the same thing for Alvarez. If he's going to be your full-time DH, then Ibby, he has to. Forget about the stuff we talked about that was gravy, right? We talked about if he hit 220 and 20 home runs, it would be such an upgrade over what we got from catcher the last few years with McCann. You'd be like dancing in the streets. Yes. But if he's your full-time DH and he hits 220 and 20, not great. No. If he's your full-time DH, he's got to hit 260, 270, and he's got to hit 30 home runs, 25 at least. So all of a sudden his value changes. I don't say it diminishes, but it changes. That's all. And that's what you have to look at from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it comes with the position. When a guy's catching, they know that it wears down the body. So when a guy, hits 15, even 15 home runs at the catching position, you're like, and that guy catches 130 games a year, like it's a damn good player if a guy does that, because you know that you get beat up behind there through just the rigors of the entire season, being
Yeah.
able to do that. So if this guy can come in and handle stuff and hit 20 to 25 home runs, yeah, that's damn good. And you want that. But yeah, if you are just DHing, your job is to then be a hitter, nonstop hitting, and be a force. And if you're not going to be that and only provide those catching stats, not the same. So yes, position and where they are plays a huge role here.
Before we get out of here, I think this is the most connected conversation that we can have to the Carlos Correa stuff, put a bookend on everything. It's a great comment from Carlos Ramos. Eduardo Escobar will hit 25 home runs, 79 RBIs. Book it. Don't ask me about his batting average, though. Your thoughts on those numbers from Eduardo Escobar this season?
I like that you came up with 79 RBIs. That's pretty precise. I thought I thought that was pretty precise to say that. But yeah, I look, I think Eduardo Escobar is a good ball player. Do I think he might, to further that, do I think he might hit 230, 225? Maybe. But I said, I wanted that guy on this team. When the rumors were coming out, oh, he might get dealt if this gets done. It's like, no, I didn't want to deal him. I think he is a key part of this team overall, on field, off field. He's a big part. Do I think he can hit 20 home runs? Absolutely. Can he be a guy that's almost every day hitting fifth or sixth in this lineup? I think so, easily. Do I expect him to get maybe a couple more spells from third to be DH and allow Brett Baty to play more? Yes, I do, because I do think Brett Baty is going to play a big part in this team this year, based off
even Guillorme to give them a different look.
Right.
Whatever it may be. Guillorme's a poor man's. Yeah. Yeah, I think Guillorme's a poor man's McNeil. Yeah, so I think if you have him DH and then you have Guillorme play third base a little bit, I think that makes sense. So I think all your points are spot on.
Yeah, and you're going to see constant shifting around as well from that aspect of, guys, McNeil going to the outfield, maybe Baty even getting some time in the outfield. Everyone's going to get their at-bats and their looks. But I'm with you, Carlos. I think Eduardo Escobar is nothing to sneeze at like people have. The point that I made at the beginning of the show was simply saying that there is a stark difference between what he brings and what Carlos Correa brings, but that is not me saying that Eduardo Escobar is not good for this team. They were just completely different. I still think that Eduardo Escobar can hit 20 home runs, can drive in 80 can drive in 80 as opposed to 79. I will say 80. But yeah, I do think he can provide something like that, and it will play big for this team. It has to.
Yeah, and look, if we're being honest, if we're being fair about last offseason, Eduardo Escobar, when you look at the people the Mets signed, was basically brought in to hit fifth. He was brought in to protect Pete, because that's been the kind of hitter he's been his whole career. His whole career, Eduardo Escobar has been like a very prototypical 5-6 hitter. Yeah. And I think the Mets looked at it and they said, okay, him and Canna bring different things to the table. But I think on any given day, either one of them can kind of hit fifth, ride the hot hand, go with the matchups, do some things like that, because I think it was pretty much understood that Marte was either going to lead off or hit second, and then that was going to allow you to shape the lineup a certain sort of way. Obviously, you could get creative, Ibby. You could turn around and say, look, you could take a guy like Lindor. I wouldn't do this it wouldn't be my preference, but with McNeil's presence, you could go Nimmo, Marte, McNeil, Alonso, Lindor. You could give Pete some protection that way. Or you could just keep Lindor where he is in the 3, and then you could put McNeil in the 5. I know McNeil doesn't give you the pop, but I like McNeil, the fact that he's going to hit 300. He's going to drive in plenty of runs. So the one thing you worry about there is if Pete's on base, McNeil always hits the ball hard. He hits into a lot of double play potential there with Pete on base. But, I think you can't nitpick all those things. But I think if Escobar, to bring the conversation full circle, if he has the kind of year that we thought we were going to get from him, that the back of his baseball card dictates, he's going to hit fifth a lot of the time, whether he's DHing or playing third base. And he can, because he's done it. So look, is he Correa? Absolutely not, to your point. but I think he's better than what he showed last year. I think he's more like the player that he was in August and September for us than he was the entire beginning of the season. And people are talking about, oh, he could probably hit 20 home runs. I mean, he basically hit 20 home runs last year, and it was a terrible season.
Yeah, I really think that the fact that people really took this as an opportunity to just hammer the idea that Beatty and Escobar are bad players. It's one thing to be upset that you didn't get Correa. It's a whole nother thing to just completely, just like I said before, to shit on these players when they're not bad players. Are they Carlos Correa? No, they're not, but that doesn't mean that they cannot provide for this team for the better. That's the issue I have with people. You're just diminishing the types of players that they are, that being Escobar, and what they could potentially be in Beatty. Let it play out. Again, I said this a lot on the show today. Relax, Mets fans.
Well, I think Chris just nailed it. Escobar's hitting 30, and if he doesn't, we're booing. That's it. That's it.
It's 100% true.
He's hitting 30. Otherwise, he's dead to us. Absolutely no middle ground. It's gone. It's done. Rael doing it. Yes, you should. You should do this. People hit that
hit
thumb
the thumbs
button.
up. Hit
thumb
the
up.
Thumbs
Not
up
just any thumb button, because I believe there's also a thumbs down, and we don't really want that button.
No, I don't want the thumbs. I want the thumbs up.
Want the thumbs up to be hit.
Thumbs up.
You know, Ibby, we'll just kind of finish on this because I think we're talking about lineup construction and all that. We could talk more about this next week kind of in detail. But one of the things I want to bring up is that there's the argument of, well, now the Mets offense looks exactly the same as it did last year. And the lineup is the same. I think the one thing that people need to realize when they say that is that, again, the numbers stand for themselves. It was a very good offense for 162. But apart from that, you had three guys in the lineup who had these unbelievable years. Alonso, McNeil, Lindor. And when you look at the years they had, they weren't like, they were career years for some, like for Alonso and McNeil, career years to this point. But I don't think they're years that you couldn't possibly fathom them replicating, especially at this point in their baseball careers, right? Like you look at it, and for, you know, the kind of player Lindor is, you could see him putting up those numbers again. The kind of player Alonso is, you could see him doing that again. He's the kind of guy that could lead the league in RBI any year he touches the field. You look at McNeil, McNeil's going to keep on hitting. McNeil's going to probably hit close to 300 again, probably over 300 again. So you're looking at those guys replicating what were excellent years, but not like, you know, the year Aaron Judge had where he hit 60 plus home runs. You're looking at years that should be what they do. Everybody else, Escobar had a down year. Canna had a down year. Marte had a good year, but then he got hurt. So you're just looking for some of these guys to regress to the mean. And I think that that is something where, you know, you could see this offense be better by accident because guys like Canna, guys like Escobar, and, you know, a guy like Marte, if he doesn't get hurt the way he did, like these guys are going to contribute in a major way. Even Brandon Nimmo, he did some things at the highest point of his career last year, but other things were down. You know, the OBP was down. So I think some of that stuff, you know, again, just a regression to the mean.
Yeah, and I hate when everyone just hops on the fact that it's the same lineup, and then they'll say, oh, they're going to regress. They're not going to win 101 games. Again, it's like, well, I'm not expecting them to win 101 games. I'm not sitting there thinking, if you go into that thinking they're going to win 101, like, I think you're a little bit crazy. But once again, they can still be a damn good team winning 92, 93 games. And the assumption that what the Braves did last year is normal is another thing that just pisses me off because, yes, I know the Braves are a damn good team. I'm not sitting here saying that they are bad. I am not discrediting them at all. I'm not even discrediting what the Phillies are doing this offseason. I know it's going to be a tough NL East. I'm not saying that this is going to be a cakewalk at all, but I hate the fact that people automatically assume that the Phils are going to go off without a hitch because they got Turner, not realizing that, well, there's no Harper for the foreseeable future. And I hate the fact that they just assume that the Braves are going to just do what they did last year for an entire 162. So, like, basically, they're going to eliminate that bad month and a half that they had, and they're going to win 130 games this year. It's like, no, it's not
First of all,
happen.
The Braves aren't even going to do what they did last year, period. The Braves are not going to play a stretch of baseball for 3 months where they play 775 ball. So
It's
forget about
it.
They're not going to. That's once in a lifetime type shit that we watched last year. The fact that the Mets played poorly over that stretch and played 650 baseball and lost the division is insane.
Right. It's
650.
nuts.
650 baseball. 650 baseball, you should be walking to the division. You should be like just strutting. Like it's easy, 650. The other team plays 750, 775. What are you going to do?
Nothing.
You can't. And they're not going to do that again. They are absolutely not. Do I think this division is going to be a dogfight? Somebody said it in the comments earlier. Yeah, it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah,
do I think it's a 3-team race? Absolutely, yes. It'll be a 3-team race.
Yes.
Do I think the Mets are going to make the playoffs? Absolutely, they're going to make the playoffs. Do I think they're going to win the division? No idea. But do I think that you're going to have 2 teams in the same division win 100 games again? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Probably not. None of those teams might win 100 games. You know, it might be knock down, drag out. The team that wins might win 95 games. 98 games.
There's nothing wrong with that.
91 games.
That's a damn good year.
Of course it is.
That's a damn good year. And that's why I said people get spoiled when they get that 101, which was incredible. But like they're gonna think that, oh, we're gonna win 100 games every year. It's like, no, that's not how baseball works.
Yeah.
Not how baseball works.
Listen, we're gonna get out of here, but this is a great comment from Stevie Mac to take us home. If you hit the thumbs down button, I'm locking you in a room with Frank the Tank for a whole day with no food or internet. Good luck. Rael saying Stevie is not messing around. Chris saying lock Frank up with Darren Ruff. And to make matters worse, this is like it's becoming like a Saw moment. Chris Torres, Joe and Clark has the keys. Oh my goodness. God. I can't think of
the worst movie I've ever heard.
Yeah, like this is worth like put my head in the bear trap thing from Saw 2. Like I don't even care. I will saw off my own leg before I sit in a room for a whole day with Frank the Tank, with Joe and Clark with the keys. The only thing you could do to sweeten the deal for me is to give me that Carlos Correa Mets jersey that Jenny was giving away. Oh my goodness. Anyway, look, I think that's our show. We'll be back next week. We're going to do some fun stuff next week. We talk more about lineup construction, all that stuff, where the Mets could go with Beatty. You know, obviously now getting a little bit better of a shot to play third base, but probably will still maybe get a shot playing some left field. Somebody threw a comment earlier about, I think it was Stevie Mac, Mauricio potentially, getting some outfield reps. I think that's on the table.
Yep.
Listen, Mauricio worked himself into a non-prospect and then won the MVP of the Dominican League. You can't overlook that.
Hold on. There's one thing I wanted to bring up before we get out of here. I have to bring it up because I saw this on Twitter and I was like, this guy, and I'm not even going to bring up the Pete aspect because that was ridiculous. But did you happen to see on Twitter the guy who got a lot of traction about contract extensions, because that became a big topic because Correa is like talking what we talked about last week, contract extensions with Pete and Jeff McNeil. Did you happen to see?
Is this going to make me angry?
It's going to make you go, come on. First of all, the Pete one was ridiculous. No need to even bring that one up. I get what he's trying to say, but I think he was just misunderstanding what the first base market gets in terms of overall contract.
What was the number he said for Pete, to give me
context? For Pete, it was over 3.
300?
Yes. It was
million?
Over 3. Yes.
US?
Yeah. Yes.
No, absolutely not.
But the other one was more ridiculous. And that
you guys are watching my reactions in real time. I literally have no idea what he's talking about.
He wanted to extend Jeff McNeil.
Who
we both love.
Love Jeff McNeil. He might be my favorite player on the Mets. It's him or Alonso or Lindor. It's close. All right.
He said, I want to give him 6 years.
6 years.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to take a guess at the overall number? What he said over 6 years? I said, for context, everyone, last week I said, if you offer Jeff McNeil tomorrow 4 years, $72 million, he sprints to sign it.
Correct.
Sprints to sign it because he knows he's not free until he's 34. He would sprint to sign that. This guy said 6 years. What do you think the total number was?
175.
Close. I think he was he was in the 160s. 162 maybe, something like
No,
that.
that's
it,
insane.
it is insane. It's absolutely insane. And I was reading the comments, and some people were agreeing with them.
No, look,
so what are we doing here?
The people who watch this show every week, we have talked about this a million times, and I hate to beat a dead horse on this, but since it's come up, Jeff McNeil is excellent. Jeff McNeil does everything you want him to do. He's an easy story to root for, unless like you don't like the pissy attitude things. Like I don't care about that, but sometimes people do. Yeah, like to throw their helmet down and all this stuff. Like I get it. If you don't like that, then maybe he's not quite so easy to root for. But if that doesn't matter to you, and it doesn't matter to me, he's a guy who was a non-prospect, came out of nowhere. All he does is hit. He plays any position they ask him to play. He's basically a better version of Daniel Murphy. He's a Ben Zobrist type for the modern MLB. He's excellent. I love him. I said a minute ago, he might be my favorite player on the team. That said, when you're a late blooming non-prospect and you don't come up until your mid to late 20s, you're not going to be a free agent until, like Ibby said, you're 34 years old. The Mets don't need to extend Jeff McNeil. This whole like extend Pete, extend McNeil in the same sentence, it doesn't fly for me. Extend Pete because you want to give yourself cost certainty with a guy who's going to hit 40 home runs. He's going to lead the Mets in every offensive category when he retires, more than likely. Like, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a legacy player. Jeff McNeil is excellent, and I'd like him to spend his entire career on the Mets, but he also doesn't have to, because you could just keep paying him every year in arbitration, and then when he's 34 years old, if he's still good, maybe you could give him one of those like the DJ LeMahieu deal, not the one he got, the big one, the one he got that was like taking a flyer on with the Yankees. Yeah. It was like that 2-year deal, 3-year deal. Give him that deal. Give him that deal where he's making big money over the course of 2 or 3 years, because you say, look, he's 34, but the guy still is slapping the ball all over the place. He's hit 300 every year. It doesn't matter if he's 34. Pay him then. So some of this stuff is just ridiculous to me. Like, look, and again, if they want to extend him to the tune of what you said, 4 years, 72, something like that.
Yep. That was
if you want to give him 4 years,
with that one. Yeah.
If you want to give him 4 years, 72, and you're going to give Pete, 175 or, 200, and that Pete's probably a 175 to 200, or if you want to use the Austin Riley deal, 175 to 225 in that ballpark. Okay. Agreed. So if you're going to give Pete 175 to 225, somewhere in that range, then yeah, you could also extend McNeil for 4 years, 75 even, but $165 million for 6 years. That's insane. Yeah. That's insane. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I had to squeeze that because it slipped my mind that I thought of it. I was like, I got to bring this up because I know he's going to react to it. It's going to be good. So I had to get that in there. But yes, the only thing left that I wanted to say was, relax, Mets fans. The team is good. You're going to be okay. They're going to round out the roster. Just try to get your lives back in terms of, not refreshing Twitter every 3 seconds, not looking for this saga. You don't have to worry about it anymore. It is over in terms of us. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for joining us. We had a good room today. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe. We're trying to get over 200. We have I haven't even told John about this yet, but I do have a giveaway planned that's going to coincide with YouTube, with getting our follower count up on our sub count up. So that's going to be a good one. I think it should do well. Once we hit 200, then I will make sure that I put that out there to then start from 200 to try and grow even more. So yes, there are some fun things on the horizon. I'm excited. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm. Make sure you subscribe. And thank you, as always.
And like Shay says, this isn't Oprah where everybody gets an extension. You get an extension, you get an extension, and you get an extension.
And everyone's over $150 million. Like, no, that's not how this works.
That's not how it works. Listen, we didn't bring this up because totally forgot, but yes, congrats to Gary Cohen, New York Sportscaster of the Year. Thank you, Chris, for throwing that out there with the Correa stuff and some of the nonsense we were talking about. Totally forgot. And also, you need to mention, sorry that his mom passed also, I believe last week somber, as well. Yes. So, condolences to Gary Cohen, and also congratulations to Gary Cohen at the same time, which I know is a weird thing to say side by side, but in this particular instance, I guess that's the only real way to say it. So Ibby said everything about liking and subscribing that I would say. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you so
Next
much,
week,
everyone.
we should be back in our regularly scheduled time slot, which is 4 p.m. on the East Coast.
John
Apologies
Pending.
again. My fault today for being Hollywood Rock. There was nothing else I could do about it. It just is what it is. But thank you guys. And of course, if you couldn't watch or listen to any of this here today, you can watch it. You can listen to it tomorrow, courtesy of the Chop Sports Network, wherever it is you get your podcasts. So we will see you guys next week for another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. That's Ibby. I'm John. Peace.